Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Barbara Stevenson, President of the American Foreign Service Association. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today as we gather to pay tribute to colleagues who did not make it home from serving our country abroad. This tradition of gathering at AFSA's memorial plaques dates back over 80 years. In a more recent edition, the Senate in 1996 passed a resolution calling for the first Friday of May to be recognized as American Foreign Service Day. That resolution had 54 co-sponsors from both parties, showing wide bipartisan support for the idea of strong American global leadership and for the Foreign Service. I want to thank Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in particular for being with us today. His first act upon entering this building as Secretary of State on February 2 was to join me at these plaques over here to pay his respects to our fallen colleagues. As he promised he would in his arrival remarks, the Secretary begins meetings by checking in on us, asking if we are all safe. This year, for the first time in 13 years, we are not adding a new name to the wall. But as the 248 names on these plaques attest, the answer to the Secretary's question is no, not everyone makes it home safe. Members of the American Foreign Service deploy worldwide to protect and serve America's people, interests, and values. We know that America's crucial global leadership role depends in large measure on effective diplomacy, which means it depends on us, the people who run 270 diplomatic missions around the world. As I often say, to lead, we must be present. And to be present, we must take appropriate measures to manage the risks inherent in our overseas deployment. We look forward to working with Secretary Tillerson to manage those risks smartly so we can keep the American flag flying at embassies and consulates around the world. And while we pledge to do our best to manage the risks that are part and parcel of our mission, we also confirm by our presence here today that members of the Foreign Service who die while serving our country abroad will be remembered and honored for their service and sacrifice. The presence of so many distinguished colleagues and guests demonstrates that commitment. I'd like to note that for the first time we have representatives from the leadership of every agency with the Foreign Service workforce in attendance at this ceremony. Acting USAID Administrator Wade Warren, USAID Counselor Tom Stahl, Deputy Director General of the Foreign Service Commercial Service, Judy Ranke, Associate Administrator of the Foreign Agricultural Service, Bryce Quick, Bobby Ritchie, Deputy Administrator for Foreign Service Operations for the Foreign Agricultural Service, Broadcasting Board of Governors CEO John Lansing, and Dr. John Shaw, the Senior Staff Foreign Service Officer at the Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service. And I'd also like to welcome Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Tom Shannon, Acting Undersecretary of State for Public Affairs and Public Diplomacy, Bruce Wharton, Director General of the Foreign Service, Arnie Chacon, Executive Director Joe McManus, Medical Director Charles Rosenfarb, and my Foreign Service colleagues who have capably stepped into Assistant Secretary roles during this important time. Peter Barlerin, Virginia Bennett, David Donahue, Anita Freed, Judy Garber, Pat Haslick, John Heffern, Simon Henshaw, Thomas Hushek, Tracy Jacobson, Stu Jones, Tina Cadenow, Bill Miller, Will Mosier, Paco Palmieri, Justin Ciborel, Susan Stevenson, Mark Taplin, William Todd, and Mary Warlick. Of course, on any given day, about 2/3 of the Foreign Service is, as the name suggests, serving abroad. We are joined today in our customary moment of silence by colleagues at embassies and consulates around the world. At 7 p.m. last night, noon local time in Apia, Samoa, Chargé d'Affaires Angelina Wilkinson led the members of her team at the American Embassy in a moment of silence. At 8 p.m. our time, the same occurred at our embassy in the Marshall Islands. At 10 p.m. in Vladivostok and Papua New Guinea. An hour later in Beijing and Hong Kong, and from there around the globe, Kathmandu, New Delhi, Tbilisi, Libreville, Prague, Praia, Belfast, Sao Paulo, Caracas, Santiago, and many others. Ambassador Tuller, in charge of Embassy Sana'a, was unable to meet with his team in Yemen, so he convened them separately in Amman, in Riyadh, and Jeddah. We can hardly stand in front of these plaques without mentioning our missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Chargé Williams asked to observe the moment of silence on Thursday in Baghdad so that her locally engaged staff could participate. And in Kabul, Ambassador Jorns reminded us that his team held a moment of silence April 6th to mark the 4th anniversary of Anne Smedinghoff's death. Before we offer our own moment of silence, I would like to ask everyone to please stand as the United States Armed Forces Color Guard presents the colors.
Forward, march!
I ask that you remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of our fallen colleagues, and then for the national anthem. Fellow Foreign Service Officer Katie Nutt will bring us out of the moment of silence by singing the Star-Spangled Banner. Like many of her generation, Katie was doing something else, in her case singing on Broadway, when 9/11 rang out as a call to service. Katie's going to sing for us today, and she asks that we all join her in singing the final passage, that beloved passage of our national anthem that begins, "Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave." So now, please join me and our colleagues at embassies and consulates around the globe in observing a moment of silence in honor of our fallen colleagues.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Right shoulder, forward!
Thank you, Katie. And the answer to that question, of course, is yes. So please be seated. I would now like to invite our Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, to the podium to give remarks and read a message from our President, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you, Barbara. I also want to thank our Armed Forces Color Guard for the presentation of the color and obviously for their service to our country. And I would say I was surprised and delighted to see one of my staff, Katie Nutt, singing the national anthem, but she did sing happy birthday to me when she had laryngitis. So I think she wanted an encore performance to prove to me how well she could sing, but she did a fantastic job. Thank you, Katie. Also want to take a moment to thank Senator Dan Sullivan. I don't know if Senator Sullivan made it over today. I know he intended to from Alaska. And I wanted to make a comment on Senator Sullivan. Some of you may already be aware he is in the process of creating a Foreign Service caucus for former Foreign Service members that are serving on the Congress on the Hill. I think it's a fantastic initiative on his part, and one that I think will serve us well, it will serve all of you well, and gives us yet another voice on the Hill to represent the interest of not just the Foreign Service officers, but I think the entire State Department. So if you have a chance to see Senator Sullivan, please express your appreciation for his leadership in this particular initiative of his. Also want to thank and recognize as well the leaders of the other foreign affairs agencies, USAID Acting Administrator Wade Warren. Wade, glad you're here. FSC Acting Director General Judy Ronke, and Associate FSA Administrator Bryce Quick, and BBGCO John Lansing. Thank all of you for being here. It's been my great privilege to take part in the American Foreign Service Association's memorial ceremony honoring the service and sacrifice of the men and women who did not make it back. Even amidst the nonstop business of the State Department, and while we work at a pretty torrid pace, I think it is always important to set aside time to pay tribute to our fallen colleagues. Although he was unable to be here today, President Trump also released a statement sending his greetings and sincere gratitude to all members of the United States Foreign Service and civil services at federal agencies here at home, as well as at embassies and consulates around the globe. As I have gotten to know the President, I have seen firsthand how much he appreciates, and that appreciation is growing, I assure you, for the work of our hardworking public servants here and those who serve on behalf of the nation around the world. Each of the 248 fallen heroes and heroines whose names are engraved on the memorial plaque represents a unique individual life, and I think we can never lose sight of that. These men and women had families, they had loved ones, they left behind dreams, unlived, plans, unrealized. These names span our country's history. From the beginning of our young republic, Americans have gone abroad representing our country, advancing our interests and values, and raising our flag. Today, I'd like to share with you some of their stories. The first name on the plaque is William Palfrey. In 1780, this Revolutionary War veteran and former aide to George Washington was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate to be U.S. Consul General to France. Palfrey, who had served as Paymaster General of the Continental Army with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, set out on his sea voyage on December 20th, but was never heard from again. The citation underneath his name reads, "Lost at Sea." He was 39 years old. A graduate of Bryn Mawr College in archaeology and later the University of Pennsylvania Law School, Margaret Ruth Alexander worked as a law clerk for the U.S. District Court for the District of Delaware before joining USAID in 1987 as a legal officer for the Office of the General Counsel. Margaret later served as Senior Regional Legal Advisor in East and Central Africa, the Caribbean, and Western and Central Africa, Assistant General Counsel for the Europe and Eurasia Bureau, and Chief of the Regional Legal Office in Southern Africa. Her final post was a Deputy Mission Director in Kathmandu, Nepal, where she died in a helicopter crash on September 24th, 2006. She was 56 years old. Her sustained exemplary performance earned her USAID's Superior Honor Award for providing legal services while in East Africa, and promotion to the rank of counselor within the Senior Foreign Service. She had recently been named the USAID Director to the Democratic Republic of Congo, a post she would have assumed the following year. Just a few short weeks ago, family, friends, and colleagues of Anne Smegninghoff gathered here to honor her memory on the 4th anniversary of her tragic death in 2013. Born in 1987 in River Forest, Illinois, she graduated from Johns Hopkins University with degrees in International Studies and Spanish in 2008. Smegninghoff joined the Foreign Service 2 years later as a public diplomacy officer and worked as an assistant information officer in the public affairs section of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, where she helped strengthen relations between Afghans and Americans. On April 6, 2013, Anne was on a mission to deliver books to a school in Kalat Zabul province when a suicide bomber killed her and 4 more Americans. William Palfrey, Margaret Ruth Alexander, and Anne Smegninghoff all embodied our country's greatest ideals, and they believed in using diplomacy and the tools of statecraft to promote them. I wish we had enough time to tell the story of each name. They deserve it. I do take solace in the fact that we did not have to add any names to this plaque this year. But I know our men and women always put mission first, and though they are judicious and they take the necessary security precautions, there are inherent risks in all we do to advance America's interests and values to keep our nation safe. As your Secretary, I promise you I will do all I can to make sure we are not forced to add another name to this wall, by making the safety of our people my highest priority and by asking all of you to do the same, and taking action to bolster the protection of our people around the globe. Our diplomats and foreign affairs professionals could have used their many talents in other ways, but they and you chose service to represent our country in an uncertain and dangerous world. These 248 men and women died as they lived in service to others. Today, the Department honors their memory and contributions, and a grateful nation expresses profound appreciation for their courage and their commitment. And now I ask you to join me in a moment of silence while the wreath is placed.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. We very much appreciate that you're with us today. May I ask that everyone please rise as the United States Armed Forces Color Guard retires the colors. Thank you all for being here today and for honoring our colleagues. Thank you.